I got to start with a confessional because I booked the expert that you're about to meet today because I need to talk to her. I struggle with this profoundly. I am talking about organization in your home. You may be the person that is super slobby, or you might be the one that is like almost OCD. This is a conversation for all of us. My guest today says, you and I, we got this topic of organizing completely wrong. Hey, it's your friend Mel, and today I'm coming clean on the Mel Robbins podcast. Today's episode is one of those episodes where I got to start with a confessional because I booked the expert that you're about to meet today because I need to talk to her. This is an area where I need coaching. I struggle with this profoundly. What am I talking about? I am talking about organization in your home. Yep, I'm super successful, but when it comes to my mudroom, my bathroom, my kitchen, just basically anything in my house, I can't seem to keep it together. I got piles all over the place. I feel like I take hours to organize stuff, and then within a day, it's a disaster again. And, you know, if I'm really being honest with you, 90% of the bickering that Chris and I do, it's over the messes that I make. The half-drunk cups of coffee that I leave on the counter, the Kleenexes that I don't quite make to the whatever it's called, the trash bin. Like, this is an area where I need help. I feel like a failure. And you may relate to me. You may be the person that is super slobby or can't seem to stay organized, or you might be the one in your family or relationship that is like almost OCD. You are like a walking Excel spreadsheet. Regardless of which one you are, this is a conversation for all of us, because if you're the kind of person like me whose bathroom counter is covered with stuff, your closet is overflowing, you haven't seen your kitchen counter in days, I know it weighs on you. I know that you don't want people to come over to your house until you've cleaned it up. And it's not about how successful you are. It's about the fact that you just can't keep up with your living space. And it makes you feel like there's something wrong with you. And whether you're the neatnik and you're just so frustrated with your roommates or family members or your spouse, like Chris is with me, because you're the one picking up with him and it's driving you crazy, or you're the one that's driving yourself crazy. My guest today says, you and I, we got this topic of organizing completely wrong. Her hit blog, A Slob Comes Clean. Isn't that a great name? And her book, How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind. This is the expert for me. I would like to know how to manage my stuff without losing my mind. She's got hundreds of thousands of followers that hang on her every bit of advice. You're going to love her. Please help me welcome Dana White to the Mel Robbins podcast. Hey, it's Mel, and I wanted to jump into the middle of that podcast episode you were watching to make sure you knew about a free opportunity that I created for you. It's a new 3-part training called Take Control with Mel Robbins. It is packed with science. It is packed with action. It's exactly what you need right now. I know that you are tired of feeling like you're in survival mode. You're tired of merely coping, and it is time to tap back into your excellence and power again. Let me coach you. Let me guide you on the steps that you need to take in order to level up and start executing. It's going to feel so great to start winning again. All you got to do is click on the link right there in the caption. It's melrobbins.com/take control. It is free. It is for you. And you need to be in it. Now, let's go back to the podcast. All right. Well, welcome, Dana White. I'm so excited that you're here.
Thanks for having me on. This is fun.
Really fun. Although I did notice, Dana, that as I was putting on some lipstick to dress up for this, sort of a metaphor for cleaning up your house before you have somebody over, I looked down at my t-shirt and my cat, my rescue cat, Mr. Noodle, had been sitting on my lap. I am covered in cat hair right now. And so I think that is a fitting way to open up a conversation about how you can manage your house without losing your mind and how you can actually take control of your life by taking control of clutter. And what I wanted to do was start with how this all happened, that you became a decluttering expert and an expert on helping people take control of this area of your life.
I never would have thought that this is the thing that I would talk about. I would have laughed. My mother still laughs about it a lot. Um, I I wanted to be a writer. I mean, that's what it came down to. I wanted to be a writer, and I figured out what blogs were back in 2009, and uh, didn't start one because my house was a disaster. So like I knew my personality. I know that I throw myself into things. I knew this would be something I would throw myself into. And so I put off starting to write because my house was so bad, thinking, okay, this is a new motivation. I've been messy my entire life, but this is my new motivation. And yet I still could not figure it out. So I came up with a kind of a compromise. I thought I was going to start a practice blog. It was anonymous in the beginning, where I would use that to stay focused, to figure out what's going on in my home. And that, then I would figure out my house, get it perfect, and then write about things I actually felt qualified to write about. The joke's on me because it's now 2023, and I am still writing about this, but also I now teach it to other people, but I teach it from the perspective of the person to whom this stuff does not come naturally. So that's actually my superpower in the end, right? Is that I am speaking as someone who legitimately struggles with this. And so I'm sharing what I've figured out. So that's how I've ended up in this space, but it still surprises me when I really think about it.
I want to stop right there and unpack that, because I think what you just said is so game changing. And excuse me, I just got a cat hair in my mouth. Holy smokes. And it went so far back in my throat that, when like something hits your throat and you feel like you have to sneeze.
I have a German Shepherd. I completely understand. So yes.
I think what you just said is so profound, and I relate to it. And I bet you listening relate to this. So I want to just slow it down real quick, because here we are almost 20 years ago. She has aspirations to be a writer. And what kept her from starting was the clutter in her house. And how many projects have you put off, or dreams have you put on the shelf because you keep saying to yourself, oh, when I get around to like clearing out my workspace, or clearing out the garage, or clearing out the back bedroom, or making my house look the right way, or my room look the right way, then I will be able to start this thing that I actually care about. And so you're in this situation, and I tracked down your very first blog post, and I would love for you to read to everybody the words that you wrote on August 24th, 2009, as you were creating an anonymous blog as a way to hold yourself accountable for writing while you cleaned up your house so you could start writing. I mean, this is fabulous that this is how this started. So read us a little bit of the parts that I, pointed out to you.
I will. And I just want to say I hadn't read this in a very long time, so it was fun to read for me. I would be so afraid that if someone saw my house on the wrong day, translated any day I'm not expecting company, I would feel like a fraud. My house is messy, really messy. And this is the area where I feel like a total failure. I'm constantly frustrated with it. And I know it affects all the other areas of my life and the lives of each person in my family. Even the things I'm pretty good at could be so much better if it weren't for this problem. I wanted to finally get this thing conquered. I'm not doing a 30-day or even a 365-day plan to a cleaner house. I need to change my routine, my habits, and finally be consistent in this. My hope is that writing daily on this blog will make me keep my focus.
Wow. Dana, I always say that you're one decision away from a different life, and the decision to just start writing as a practice to keep your feet to the fire on trying to change your behavior around clutter, that launched a whole business for you and an expertise for you. And you've helped people around the world conquer the same thing. And I'm really glad that you're here because I profoundly struggle with clutter. And I know it might surprise a lot of people that that is the case. But I would love to just unpack for everybody listening, how common is it for people to struggle in this area of their lives?
It's very common. It's also very common for people to not know about it, because what I have found is that many times the people who are struggling with clutter tend to be very successful in other areas of their life. And
Oh,
so you just assume they have it together, they're organized. Honestly, one of the most transformative things for me as I started writing, believing, like I completely believed I was the only person who struggled the way that I did. I thought that if people started to read my blog, they were going to say, "You're disgusting. Get off the internet. You're a horrible mother." I mean, really, like those are the thoughts that went through my mind as I thought about, I'm showing pictures. I wasn't showing my face. I wasn't using a real name, all that kind of stuff. But because I was anonymous, I was being very honest. But as I shared things and people did start to read my words, they would say, "These are my thoughts. These are my struggles. I see things exactly the same way that you do." Well, this was back in 2009, right? And back then, everybody was on Blogger, and you could like click on their name and go find their profile, right? When they
mm-hmm.
left a comment. And so I would see who these people were that were saying, "I relate to what you're saying here." And I saw that they were poets and artists and theater teachers. I was a theater teacher. There are lots of theater teachers who struggle with this kind of stuff. Like there is a direct link between creativity and struggling with clutter. We see the world differently, right? Like I love that about myself. But as I started to realize there was this link, I realized, oh, okay. Okay. So the things that make me me also result in me struggling with clutter. And that helped me accept that, okay, this is part of who I am. This is how my brain works. And then I realized the reason I've always felt unsuccessful is that I have been trying to follow the advice of people who like talking about this stuff, right? Like I've been following people who have been organized their whole life and think it's the most fun thing in the world to talk about. My brain is very different from their brains. And so I was lost on page 3. I would look at their before pictures and I would think that would be my dream after picture. Like I didn't, it wasn't computing to me.
Yeah.
Okay. So accepting that this is part of me actually is what gave me the freedom to say, okay, that may not work for me, but something is going to work for me. I just have to figure out what does work for my personality in my home. And then that's when I really started to make a change.
Oh my God. I'm so excited to talk to you because I feel like the odd person out when it comes to my husband, who has a brain like an Excel spreadsheet.
Mm-hmm.
The man can methodically just go through his list. He has so much discipline. It looks effortless. And I feel like the Tasmanian devil spinning around next to him, leaving things in my wake. And then we have a daughter who I think must be somewhere on the OCD spectrum, because I have never met somebody whose brain is more structured or organized or who gets so like rattled when something's out of place. And I feel somehow like I'm inept. Like I kept like is like, because I would love for you to kind of help us understand when you're a creative person or you have skills in areas of your life that don't have that sort of do organization gene. I resonated when you said, "I'm a failure." I resonated when you said, "I don't want anybody to come to my house because they're going to see what it looks like here." I feel shame, like there's something wrong with me when my husband or our daughter will walk past my closet and be like, "Oh my God," my closet. And I feel bad when they kind of jokingly tease me about, "Oh, she left that out. Oh, did this. Oh, da." And so what is it that you might feel or say to yourself if you're somebody that does struggle with clutter because nobody's ever taught you how to get a handle on this if you have a creative brain.
Right. And I just want to point out something really quickly. Look at what you've done. I mean, look at what you have built. So there is such a disconnect there that you have created what you have created that has helped so many people. And yet you feel like I'm inept. You said the word failure, like this, that is part of the disconnect, right? Because I was like, I am someone who, when I see a problem, I tackle it, I figure it out. And I could not do that with my house. Like I just couldn't. And so here's the thing. I viewed my house as a project because I am generally very successful with projects. Like that is something that I can do very well. Like you give me a large scale production, I was a theater arts teacher. I will have that thing so organized, people will be amazed, right? You will know exactly when you're supposed to be at rehearsal, exactly what we're going to be doing in that rehearsal. I mean, like everything is planned out ahead of time. I love to do the planning phase. I love the execution of my plan. I love the applause at the end of all of that. Like I love being done. And yet I would try to treat my house that way, right? Like I would say, okay, this is where I'm successful. This is how I tackle things in life. I'm going to apply that to my house. And so I am going to take an entire weekend or a week or all of summer vacation when I was teaching, whatever. And I'm going to change this place and I am going to get it under control. And then I would step back and go, oh, I'm done. Wow, this is great. And life would happen. It would go right back to being what it was. It's because I was treating it like a project. Well, your house is not a project, right? Like all of this isn't. And so it's like you're taking where you excel and having to say that doesn't work in this situation, right? So it is okay. You have gifts, you have talents. The world needs people like us, right? Like the world needs creative people who are willing to throw themselves into a big project at the expense of their house. I have a friend who is very meticulous. Her house is always great. She's great at spreadsheets, that kind of stuff. And she will say, like, we'll be talking about something. She's like, oh, I can't take that on because how would I get my dishes done and my house, keep my house under control if I did all that? And I'm like, literally, that never crosses my mind when I get excited about a big project.
Yes.
And
yes.
so, yeah, like that's it. So acknowledge you have so much to offer. So let's find a way. There is a way. Okay. There is a way for you to make your house not hold you back, right? It's not that you want to turn into these other people, right? Because you want to stay you. That's a big part of it for me. I'm like, I like me. I like the stuff that I enjoy doing. I don't want to spend all my time on my house. So how can I do things in a way where I'm not just having to give all that up? Instead, I'm able to keep my house under control, and that allows me to do even more and have more fun.
That sounds incredible. And here's where my mind went.
Okay.
When you said that a lot of the ways that people that love organization don't work for a creative brain or a brain that has genius in other areas, I took a giant exhale. And because when I left the bathroom with cat hair all over my t-shirt, I noticed that my husband's bathroom counter was completely clear, nothing on it. And I looked back at my counter on my bathroom side, and it looked like somebody had taken a makeup bag and a dop kit and shaken everything out upside down, and it just splattered everywhere. And I was like, oh, like another one of those, see, I can't do this right.
Yeah.
And so I just like, okay, my brain doesn't work that way. So the self-acceptance thing and the acknowledgement that you have different gifts is super important. The second thing that happened for me, though, and I'm sure it happened for, the person listening, is that, we live in this social media world where I personally love to follow home and organization sites. I know that's really weird, given that I don't really organize very well when it comes to my home, but it's almost like pornography for me to look at a pantry that is color coded and, all the clear things and everything's perfect. And I know intellectually, Dana, that was styled by a production team, that looked like that for 1 second for a photo shoot, and that it's not real life. But I feel like I have this crazy expectation that I want my house to look like that.
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, you're where you are. You have the makeup products all over the counter and you think that's what I want.
Yes.
Are we ready for me to tell you what the difference is?
Yes.
Like here's the reality.
Hit me.
That is organizing. You need to declutter. Organizing and decluttering are separate things. They are not the same thing, but I always thought they were the same thing. I would look around at my mess and I would think, I have got to get organized, because that logically makes sense, right?
Yes.
Besides, organizing is a project. Surely I should be able to do that. But the problem was, as long as I was trying to organize, first of all, first thing I would do is sit down and make a list, right, of all the things that I was going to change and blah, 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 and figure out how the future was going to go, and anyway. And I would do that, work on a space or buy a bunch of products, bring them into my house, organizing energy was gone by the time I got home, and I just dropped them by the back door and they turned into more clutter, So it never made a real impact on my house. I was at such a rock bottom point that I honestly thought I was giving up by saying, I don't even have it in me to get organized. I am just going to declutter. Wow. Like in my mind, I thought, that's how bad I am. I've just got to declutter. I can't even think about organizing yet. Decluttering changed everything in my home. So the beauty of realizing that organizing and decluttering are not the same thing, and that you can just declutter, and that just decluttering will change everything, is that there is literally nothing to do before you get started. There is nothing. I mean, there is no planning. There's nothing. It's just starting to get stuff out of your house. Now, I have a process that I follow to kind of work me through that feeling of overwhelm when I'm looking at the mess, but decluttering is everything, because when I decluttered, then I knew what I had, which is what I had always wanted when I thought I needed to get organized, right? I knew where it was. I could get to it easily. I could access it easily because I'd gotten rid of all that extra stuff, so that when I opened the cabinet, I just saw what I needed and I could get to it without moving 15 things, right? And so decluttering made my house look better, function better, feel better. It was the thing I had been needing that I didn't know I needed. I thought I needed to get organized.
Wow. Okay. So what is the difference between decluttering and organizing, if you had to boil it down?
Organizing is problem solving. Like, organizing is, let me think how this space is going to work tomorrow and in the future. Now, an organized person might be like, no, but I'm saying from my perspective, when I thought I needed to get organized, I thought, well, how's this all gonna go? How is this gonna function from now for the next 10 years? And in my mind, it was bins and boxes,
yes,
and systems and all these things that I would look at, which is what you're talking about when you look at those images on Instagram of the color-coded things and all that. You look at that and you think, that's it. I need the colors. And so you bring the colors in, and then you're trying to fit all the stuff in there. But in reality, I realized, and I named it, that I have a clutter threshold. Everyone has a clutter threshold. What that means is it's the point at which you personally can keep the things in your home under control. Okay. It's the amount of stuff that you personally can keep under control. It's the reason why you and your friend can go shopping together, buy the exact same things. She puts it in her house, it looks like a magazine. You put it in your house, it looks like a thrift store, right? Like that difference between, like, she can handle this stuff. And that was part of that self-acceptance, right? Was realizing I brought all this stuff into my house because I wanted it. I saw potential in it. I'm a lovely person who sees value in things that no one else sees value in, right? Like, that's a great quality, except that I was bringing it into my house and I couldn't handle it. Like it was not possible for me to keep my house under control with the amount of stuff that I had in my house. So it's not it's
Wow.
not aesthetics. Some people hear clutter threshold and they're like, oh yeah, this drives me. No, I'm talking about what can you handle? What's easy for you to keep under control? So if a space is continually getting out of control, get rid of more stuff. Oh, it's still getting out of control? Get rid of more stuff. Get rid of until you realize at some point, this is what happened to me as I was like, wait a minute, I can do this. Like I can keep this under control. And that's where I realized there's this point, this level of stuff that I can handle.
You are a genius. When I hear the word organization, I think it looks pretty. That's what and you're exactly right. I'm like, okay, I just have to get the bins that line up and the labeler that has the nice font and the little tags in my laundry room. And then I take all the shit that I have and I stack it all in there and then I make it look nice. And if I spend 6 hours in one space and I've bought all the crap and I actually have enough energy to focus and get it all looking pretty, which in my mind is the baskets match and it looks like a photo shoot and everything's in its place. You're right. I'm managing shit that I can't manage because the second that our son walks in the laundry room and pulls out the thing and puts it in a different place, then everything's out of whack again and I got no energy and it doesn't look like how it's supposed to look and I feel unorganized again and it all spills out from there and then I go buy a different basket because it needs to be a bigger basket so that like I am driving myself and my husband crazy. And how do you know what your clutter threshold is? Like what is the test?
I hate to tell you this,
Uh-oh.
but there is literally no way to know other than to declutter. There's not a quiz that you can take. You can just know if my house feels overwhelming, I'm over my clutter threshold. If my house is consistently getting out of control and I feel bewildered by that, then I'm over my clutter threshold. So declutter, the only way to find your clutter threshold is to declutter. And then the maintenance for that is a 5-minute pickup. Okay. So this also, it does give you a gauge for, am I at my clutter threshold? It doesn't mean that everything is always going to be in its place. That is just not how I roll. I do not realize when something's leaving my hand. Like there's no awareness. Things just randomly end up on surfaces. Okay.
Yes.
So I could beat myself up, right? Like I could be like, oh, why am I this way? And it's not that I never still think those things, right? But that didn't help, right? Me saying, why do I do this? I've got to change. I've got to be a different person. That never helped. But what does help is for me to say, okay, I'm going to take 5 minutes. I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to pick stuff up and put it away. If 5 minutes gets my space or my home, my goal is my whole home to be under control again from picking stuff up and putting it away about once a day-ish, then I'm under my clutter threshold. Okay. So it's not that it stays perfect. It's that it stays manageable.
Okay. So can we get super tactical?
Sure. Because
the second you started to talk about clutter threshold and I started imagining my version of organization, which for my entire life has been make it look pretty. Take all the shit that I have everywhere and arrange it to look nice. It's more like staging. I'm like staging shit, right? Everywhere. I immediately thought of my kitchen counters, which drive me fucking crazy because stuff accumulates there. And then I thought about the base of the stairs. Both the stairs upstairs where everyone dumps things that need to get taken upstairs. And I thought about the stairs down to the garage, which is where we put cardboard boxes. Like I just have stacks of shit everywhere. Mm-hmm. And it drives me crazy. And so I bet as you're listening to Dana talk and you're nodding your head going, oh my God, this is me. And you can think about those places where that's a place where my clutter threshold is already through the roof. Walking into the mudroom, everything's everywhere. Kitchen counters, everything's everywhere. Base of the stairs, pile of stuff that somebody believes that there's like some magical fairy that lives in our house that picks it up and flies it up to the second floor and puts it in place. Where do you start? Like, take us to one spot, and can you walk us through the process of what decluttering actually means in that spot?
Yeah.
And how you do it.
Before we do that, let me just say, the less stuff you have, the less stuff that can pile, right? Like that was, anyway, I'll move on. So here, where I would start, I recommend what I call the visibility rule. I recommend that you go to the place that visitors to your home will see when they either come inside or are standing at the door and you're trying to keep them from coming inside, right? Because it's a mess, whatever. That is the place to start. And we're going to go through the decluttering process there. I'll explain that. But the reason why you want to start in a visible space is that you will see the progress that you're making. You will see your house getting better. The people who live with you will start to see your house getting better. You'll experience that it is easier to live in a space with less stuff. Okay.
Okay.
And so when you start there, because here's the thing, so many times when we get that desire to declutter, we go to the pantry, we go to the linen closet, we go to the top shelf of the master bedroom closet.
Yes.
We do those spaces because we think, okay, if I will work really hard on this, we really don't use this space that much. And so maybe it'll actually stay that way, right? When in reality, you can work really hard on that. You talked about like, all the color coding and blah, blah, blah in this random closet. And then at the end of the day, your husband, is like, so what'd you do today? And you're like, oh, I have been organizing all day. And I don't know about you. I'm not going to project this on you, but in my experience, I've had that exact scenario happen. And my husband would be like, really? Like, okay. Well, what is more defeating than that, right? Like, it's to feel like I have been organizing all day and I'm still embarrassed to open my front door.
Yes.
But if you work on visible spaces first, then you see the progress that you're making and you inspire yourself to keep going because you're like, oh, wow, that looks good. I may not have noticed when it was messy, but I notice now when it looks great. And then that inspires me to keep going. Okay. Do you want me to talk about the actual process?
Yes.
Okay. I know. See, I have to have like real steps because I have to remind myself still. I still look at a space and go, and I'm like, nope, I have steps. Okay. All right. So the first step is trash. Grab a black trash bag or whatever you have available. Ideally, it's black just because then you can't see what you just put inside of it. Your family can't see what you're putting inside of it.
Can I just confess something?
Yes.
I'm almost embarrassed to tell you this. So Oakley, who is super creative, he's our 18-year-old son. His room is a profound disaster. I didn't get in an argument with him because I don't live in this room, so I don't really care. And I don't clean his room. Like, that's like, you want to live like a sty? That's fine. I don't care. That's your space. But Chris was like, what the hell, dude? Like, we built all these drawers for you to throw, and they're even big drawers. So you don't have to fold things. Everything's on the floor. So Oakley cleaned his room Sunday. Okay. And he put all kinds of clothes in a bag that no longer fit him so we could donate them. This morning, they were sitting in the mudroom, which has profoundly passed my clutter threshold, in a clear, whitish colored kitchen garbage bag. In the middle, I spotted a flannel shirt that I paid a lot of money for Christmas that he has outgrown. And I tore open the bag because I could see it. And I pulled it out of the bag just this morning.
It happens, right?
Yes, you know what I'm going to do with that? I'm going to hang it in my closet because I can wear it, but I don't even want it. What the fuck is wrong with me, Dana?
Nothing's wrong with you. This is normal.
So is that why you have a black bag so you can't see the stuff that you're throwing out?
Yes, that's exactly why. Now, with that, if you're like, I don't have black trash bags, start with whatever. Start with a paper sack. It doesn't matter. Okay.
Okay.
But if you have a black trash bag, use that for exactly the reason that you're talking about. But I'm talking about trash, not necessarily donations at this point.
Okay.
Like when I start with trash, the reason I start with trash is it is literally the easiest of the easy stuff. I am not talking about deciding whether this item is trash. I'm talking about just saying, That's trash, put it in the bag. That's trash, put it in the bag. It starts the movement, right?
Okay.
Like there are literally no decisions to be made, no emotions to be felt. It is just the action. And that immediately makes the space less overwhelming because there's less stuff in it than there was before.
Okay.
But it also helps my brain start to adjust to what's actually there. Because when I look at it as a big pile, it's like, it's a pile. The pile is overwhelming. There's important stuff in there, I'm sure. And so it feels like the whole pile is full of important decisions, difficult decisions to make. But as I'm looking for trash, I'm seeing what's actually there, which then helps me be ready to move into the next steps of the process. Okay.
Okay. So we start with trash and a black bag.
Yes.
And anything that is trash. Now, I know this is a technical question, but I am mentally in a mudroom.
Okay.
If you see a mitten and it doesn't have a pair, is that considered trash as part of this process? Or are we just talking papers and crap people have not thrown out and that kind of thing?
If you have to think about it,
yes,
skip it and we'll get to it in the next step.
I love you.
Okay.
And I love that you're breaking it down because I think this is like a real thing that we struggle with. Like I see a pile and you're right. I can become paralyzed because I think there might be something expensive or important in there. And so I don't know if I'm ready to sort through all that stuff. I just don't want to see the pile because I want it to be pretty. But you're saying trash, black bag, go. What's the next step?
And the mindset there too that you're saying is, I just want it to be pretty. Change your mindset to, I'm going to make this space better. That means I can literally throw away 2 pieces of trash, 1 piece of trash, get distracted, step away because I'm just don't want to do this right now. And I've still made it better, which means I have been successful. Like if I do anything, I have achieved better. Okay. So all right. Sorry, that was a little preachy break there.
No, I think it's perfect because your point about us attacking this like a project that then spills out of control is part of the problem.
Yes.
And really leaning into this concept of decluttering as an ongoing way of life and removing things that you have to manage is genius. Because I don't feel successful in this area.
But you are successful with every piece of trash. It is better because my goal is better. My goal is to have less in the space. If you have less in the space than you did when you started, you have successfully decluttered. You're not done, but you have successfully decluttered. It's just stuff leaving your house, right?
Yep.
Okay, so let's move to step 2. Step 2 is the easy stuff. So trash was the easiest of the easy stuff because it's just going straight into the trash bag or the recycling bin. If you have one available and accessible and established, bring it with you along with that trash bag. Okay.
Okay.
But the second step is the easy step. Easy stuff I define as anything that already has an established home. It's just not there for whatever reason. Like I'm not going to agonize over why is this in the mudroom? It's just, this goes into its already established home in the kitchen or whatever. I'm going to take those things to their already established homes immediately. I can take as many as my hands will hold, but I can't take any more than that. Like I'm not going to put them in a box. I'm not going to set them aside and do it later. I'm going to go everything that comes into my hand that I pick up that I identified as easy, having an established home, no decision to make, no emotions to be felt. I am just going to go ahead and I'm going to take it there now. Okay. So again, I am making the space better. I can step away at any time because I'm making progress and only progress. Right.
Got it.
Then the third step is donations. Okay. This can happen at any point in the process. It just gives me an excuse to stick stuff in my donate box immediately without asking any decluttering questions, because there are things that obviously need to be put in there. But when you are someone who feels, who hasn't felt successful at decluttering before, it feels like all decluttering decisions are going to be difficult. So we want to narrow down the ones that you really have to make decisions about and go ahead and just stick stuff in the donate box. The key with the donate box, like the black trash bag, is that the box itself needs to be donatable. So don't stencil the word donate on the outside of a cute wooden box. Like that's not what we're doing, right?
Because that's organization.
Well, yeah.
Right.
And two, it just sets myself up to have to go back through that box again. Right. Like, and then I'm going to second guess myself. And if I know that I'm going to go through it again, then I might put things in there that I haven't actually made a real decision about. Right. Because I'm like, future me is going to have it all together. You know, that's what I always thought. Someday I'm going to be organized. How could I not be? Right. So I'm going to put this in this box because I'll know what to do with it later. And instead, I'm just putting off decisions. And then I know that that box actually has decisions to be made. So then I put off dealing with that. And that's, you know, that's what people on, I'm not on TikTok, but I hear from a lot of people who call them doom boxes. And they're like, oh, doom boxes, your process works for doom boxes. And I'm like, I think it's didn't organize, only moved is what it stands for. But just the word doom, I was like, oh, I know what that is. Yeah. I had a lot of those over the years. Right?
Well, I'm glad that you got very granular, because the second you said a donate box, I immediately imagined a plastic or a cardboard box. And I immediately imagined me taking a Sharpie and writing the word donate on a piece of paper and taping it to the side. And then I would fill it up and then like have more questions about what's in that box. So you're basically just saying, no, have a box that's already going to get donated to. Some bin that you can also drop off, or basket.
Or Amazon boxes, whatever. Yeah.
Amazon boxes. Mm-hmm. Do not write the word donate. Just know that this is going.
Do write the word donate so that you remember that was a donate box.
Okay. So write the word donate.
Right. But don't decorate it. Don't make it something you're going to want to reuse.
Got it.
Yeah.
Now, when you do this, do you recommend that you just take that box in this session and just put it in the back of your car because you're done with this decluttering moment? Or do we leave it somewhere?
You know, it's really up to you. It depends on how full it is. The decision-making is over once the thing is in the box. The action of taking it somewhere to be donated or making the phone call to have a pickup scheduled or whatever, that is a valid use of your decluttering time. But I don't want you to not declutter because you're not going to be able to go drop it off today. Okay. So like, I will often have some donate. My husband would hear this and go, you always have, you know, I always have a donate box or 2 or 3 in a spot in our garage that is ready to be taken wherever it needs to go. The decision-making though, is where the real power is. And those things are just ready to know that, oh, we're going to such and such place. There's a donation drop off near there. Let's load them up and take them.
Great. Got it. What comes after donate?
Okay. So at this point, we have removed trash, easy stuff, and obvious donations, right? So we are down to things that at first glance, you're like, either yes, they go here, or I have no idea on this item what to do. Okay. So this is where my 2 decluttering questions come in. And I had seen, when I started this, I had seen lists, beautifully written lists of all kinds of questions to ask yourself about items and whether you want to donate it or keep it. I had too much stuff in my house to ask myself 10 questions about everything, you know, and besides, those questions generally let my brain spin out, right? Like, do I love it? Well, yeah, I love all this stuff, you know, like why would I have it in my house if I didn't love it? Right. You know, so I couldn't ask myself those kinds of questions. So I came up with 2 questions. And if I can answer the first one, I don't even have to ask the second one. So the first question is, if I needed this item, where would I look for it first? Okay. It's really important that you ask exactly that question. Where would I look for it first? Does not allow for analysis. It is an instinct question. Okay. The word would is the key word. That means, because this item was not easy, it doesn't have an established home in my house. Okay. But I pick it up and I say, okay, I've got these I'm going to have a prop here. I decided not to wear these, you know, anyway, but if I needed my headphones, where would I look for them first? It is literally the first drawer or cabinet that I would open even if I had no confidence they would be there. It is because something, it needs a home, right? Like the whole, a place for everything and everything in its place that organized people say and think is so obvious. I was always like, what are y'all talking about? Like, I don't have places for things. Like, what? Like, it just didn't make any sense in my brain. And so I had to come up with a place for things. And this is how I do that. Where would I look for it first? Because here's the thing. The beauty of putting something in the place where you would look for it first is that when you look for it, you find it in the first place where you would look for it. And you find it in the first place where you look for it. Isn't that the goal that you've had all along, wanting to be organized?
It's so true. And well, no, what I'm realizing my goal is that I just want shit to look pretty. I've never even thought about like organization as a way to make my life easier. And it's a genius question because I've put things in cabinets and drawers because I didn't know where else to put it.
Yes. This is how you establish the home. You do not, what I used to do was think about where my grandma kept hers.
Yeah.
And think, okay, well, her house was always great. So I should put mine in the place, or call my best friend who's way more organized than me and say, hey, where do you keep your whatever it is?
Yeah.
But how many people say as a joke, or there's a Facebook meme or something that says, I got organized and now I can't find anything.
Yes.
Right? Like this doesn't allow for that to happen. I am putting it in the place, and it's hard in the beginning because you don't trust yourself, right? You're like, but what is the first place that pops in your mind where you would frantically look if you needed this item and had no idea where it was? Where's the first place where you would look? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And this also is part of that accepting how I actually function as opposed to how organized people function. And I wish I was like them.
Yeah.
And instead saying, okay, fingernail clippers were the thing when I came up with this question, as I was like, everybody else in the whole wide world surely would put their fingernail clippers in the bathroom drawer because that's where they're supposed to go, right? But in my family, whenever somebody is looking for fingernail clippers, they look in this junk drawer that's like on the edge of the kitchen. That is just our reality. And I said, you know what? I would rather have things be in the first place where we look than try to be like other people and never be able to find anything in my house.
That's amazing.
So
that's amazing. See, I don't know where to put nail clippers, so I just look in Chris's top drawer of the bathroom.
Well, if that's where you look for it first, then that's great. Like, that's great. If that's where you look first, that's where they should be.
Got it.
It really doesn't, there is not a perfect place for things. There's the place where you would look first in your house. That's what matters. But then there's the second part of the question, which is not actually a question, but is actually the key to my no mess, progress, and only progress decluttering process. Okay.
Okay.
And that is when you answer that question, where would I look for this first? Take it there now. People get all worked up over this. Like they are like, no, but that's can't be the most efficient way. And yet in the end, it is. So here's the deal. I used to, because I'm kind of obsessed with efficiency, which would never show with the way my house used to look, right? But I would make all these piles. I would be like, okay, this is the stuff that goes to the kids' room. This goes to the garage.
Yes.
This goes to the bathroom.
Yes.
And when I'm done,
yes,
I will go deliver all these things through the house. And that makes so much more sense than taking it there right now.
Yes.
But that's how things work in an ideal world where I don't get distracted in the midst of a project. I don't stop halfway through. Nobody starts bleeding, right? Like that's the ideal world. I don't live in an ideal world. Okay. So I decided I'm going to go ahead and take it there right now. No piles, because before I would step away for an hour or 3 weeks or whatever. And those neat little piles where I had totally made all these decisions, those neat little piles now morph into one big pile outside the space that I was initially decluttering. So my house looks worse than it did before.
Yes.
That's the whole make a bigger mess whenever you try to declutter.
Oh my gosh.
And so I said, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to take it there right now. And then when I do that, I can stop. I'm accepting the fact that I will get distracted or life will happen. I can stop at some point and this space is only better. It is never worse. I have never created a bigger mess. I'm taking one item at a time, making a final decision on it, and I'm acting on that final decision. So it's either gone in the trash bag, it's gone to its already established home, it has gone in the donate box, or I have established a home by asking myself, where would I look for this first? And then I take it there now. Okay. So that's the key to all of this. And people will resist it.
Wow.
And then I'll say, just try it. And then they will try it. And then they will email me and say, I cannot believe the difference. I cannot believe I have actually made real progress decluttering for the first time in my life. It's working. Like it's changing my house because of that. Go ahead and take it there right now. But people don't like it, but it's still, it works.
I think it's genius because, you know, I completely related to moving and sorting and organizing things into piles and then running out of energy or time or getting distracted and not actually taking those piles anywhere.
Well,
and then you're right. And it makes it worse.
Yes. You come back to the space and you have to make all those decisions again. Right?
Oh my God. I feel like I do this every weekend. That every weekend it is me on that hamster wheel of making piles and running things around and pulling apart stuff. And holy smokes, this is revolutionary.
Yeah.
What do you do about finding things that, like, how do you determine if you're keeping it? Because I feel like I get very paralyzed when I have an item and I've spent a lot of money for it, or somebody's given it to me, or I might need it some point 10 years from now. At what point do you actually take it to the junkyard? Like what's the difference between I'm throwing this out versus I'm donating?
So all of those questions that you have in your mind or that you just stated.
Yeah.
Those are the natural questions that people think they need to ask when they're decluttering. I don't ask those questions. I stick to the facts. Okay. And so my process leads me through and helps me make those decisions, but without all of the emotions, because I brought all this stuff into my house because I saw the value in it. Right. And so before, when I would declutter, I would make value decision after value decision, which is exhausting. Right.
Yes.
And then it's so emotionally exhausting. And I know it is that then I would put off decluttering because I was like, I don't have it in me to make those kind of decisions today. Right. Like, so instead I say, okay, if I needed this item, where would I look for it first? And then I take it there now. And then I look at that space. And sometimes this is a common question people have is like, what do I do when that space is its own big decluttered mess? All I'm going to do is I'm going to not leave that space any worse. And I'm going to say, what am I willing to get rid of from this messy space where I would look for this item first?
Mm-hmm.
What am I willing to get rid of from here that will create the space that I need for this item that I answered I would look for it first here? Okay. So it might be trash. Ideally, it's going to be trash or dead donations because then my trash bag and my donate box are back at the space I was initially decluttering. That'll take me back there. Right.
Right.
But so I'm just going to say what in here is trash because it needs to be decluttered, right? Like I just said, it's a total mess. There's no room for this. So it's going to be decluttered, but I'm not doing that right now. I'm sticking with this initial space. And so I'm like, what in here am I willing to get rid of in order to make room for this? And so it helps me, instead of saying, does this thing have value? I say, is there a space for it? Which is a very, what's the word? It's leaving my brain right now, but it's a very,
I don't know. I'm hanging
fact-based.
on every single word. Well, what do you do if you have like a basement or garage? There's like space in there. Can I just give you an example?
Sure.
I'm starting to realize how nuts I am about this stuff.
You are not nuts.
No, but I literally am realizing and I don't know if you listening to us are feeling the same sort of energy drain, but I'm realizing how much noise and just how much drama I add to the process of what I thought was organizing. And so I'll give you an example. So I've talked about how our son, Oakley, who is very creative, who will love this process, who spent half of his Sunday organizing his room to make his dad happy. And then he did the big thing of clothes. I've admitted that I ripped through it and pulled 2 things out. I don't know where I'm going to put that stuff because I guess it would go in my, I don't even know why I kept it. I kept it because it was something that I bought him for Christmas that was rather expensive. And then there's a jacket that's like a fall jacket that because I bought it for him when he was 15, he literally wore it for about a minute before he grew out of it. And it was expensive. And so I see this jacket, I grab it. I'm like, okay, we live in Vermont. People visit. Should I hold on to this in case somebody visits and they didn't pack a jacket? Maybe this would fit me and it would fit this. And then I literally attach all this meaning and I create these stories about why I need to keep the thing and the value of the thing. And if I ask myself, if I needed this item, where would I look for it? I'm even stalled because I go, well, I don't really need it in the mudroom. Maybe I should create a place in the basement for extra clothes for guests who forgot clothes that you need when you visit Vermont. What the fuck is going on? Like, I donate, duh.
Well, okay.
Is this
what
normal?
You just described? Yes. What you just described is your brain spinning out. Okay.
Yes.
And a lot of people who are naturally organized and who see this and go, I mean, I'll just be honest. How many times in your life, how many times in my life have I had somebody go, why are you thinking that way? That is exactly how my brain worked, which is the reason I just had somebody recently say to me, I can follow your process because I know you know all of my reasons why I want to keep this, like, and still have a process that works. Like when I'm talking to someone who's like, those are dumb reasons, like everything you said made sense to me. I get it. Right. And yet when I thought that way, my house was a disaster and I was frustrated with it. And I had all those feelings of what is wrong with me. Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I hate to just be like, let's go back to the process, except that
let's go back to the process
is what talks you through all of this. Okay. So the second decluttering question that I only ask myself, if my first response to where would I look for this first, whether it's about the jacket, whether it's about a stapler, whatever, if I look at the item and I'm like, where would I look for this first? And my answer is, okay. Then I ask myself the question, if I needed this item, would it ever occur to me that I already had one? Okay. I can think about this being in your scenario that you were talking about with but we're not going to bring the scenario into it. We're just going to ask the fact-based question. If I needed this jacket, would it occur to me that we already had one? And it's tough because you're holding it in your hand, right? Like it's there, it's in front of you. And then how many of us are like, well, I just decluttered something and then I ended up needing it. But I had to make progress in my home. I had to get stuff out of my house, right? So I had to make these hard calls and say, I'm going to be honest. If I needed this, would it occur to me that I already had one? Because I didn't have a place where I would look for it first, which means I would not have even gone looking for it. Instead, I would have done without, we would have said, hey, here's 6 sweatshirts, kid who forgot your coat, right? Or, hey, let's run by the store and grab one, or whatever. Yep. But those are both valid options. But the thing is, if I didn't get rid of this item, and I wouldn't have looked for it if I needed it, it's just sitting in my house and I'm adding more to it as I go and grab what I need because it doesn't occur to me that I already have one.
Yeah.
Okay. So that right there is me saying, this is my reality check. I'm going to stick it in the donate box. If I insist that I would know that I had it, then I have to go back to that first question and say, where would I actually look for this first? Not that I think it's going to be there, but literally, if I know for sure that I have this, then there has to be a first place where I would look, right? And I need to be honest with myself about that too.
Wow. You know, this is fascinating because it is a whole new way to think about this. Because, again, just to come back to this example, it wasn't even like I saw it in the mudroom. I came out of my bedroom, and I don't know if anybody else's family members do this, but somehow our staircase upstairs is the garbage and laundry chute where people just chuck things over the banister and they land up like at the bottom of the stairs. And so there was the donate like trash bag with the flannel shirts that I ripped out. And then laying a couple stairs above was this jacket that no longer fits him. And you can do this process, is what I'm realizing, in that moment, because I think that's also the reality. The reality of the decluttering process, if I'm tracking, is not that you go, okay, this Sunday, I'm doing this in the mudroom. It's that you walk out of your bedroom and you're like, what the fuck? Okay, he's like thrown all this stuff down. It's 7:15 in the morning. There's now a giant mess in front of me at the base of the stairs. And you're saying you can do this process right now. I see the jacket. It doesn't belong there. I have a choice in that moment to say, if I needed this item, where would I look for this first? And if it's not immediate, and if the answer is the mudroom, I walk to the mudroom and hang it up.
Yeah.
If the answer is, ooh, it doesn't fit him anymore, and do we even need to keep it? And I go to the second question, which is what was the second question?
If I needed this item, would it ever occur to me that I already had one?
If I needed this item, would it occur to me that I already had one? And the answer is yes, because I have the exact same size in a jacket for me. I buy the same company. So yes, I have one.
Would it occur to you that you had this second one? That you had your son's jacket? Because if it would, then it's fine to go take it with the place where you would look for it first, because we're also going to address the reality of that space as we get into the last step of the process. But
got it. So let's just say, let's indulge my psychoness, okay? Because I think we all have that. If you're a creative mind, you're also thinking, someday, 15 years from now, there might be a scenario where I wish I had this, right?
Yes.
So let's just say I go, okay, where am I going to look for this first? And I make a snap decision. This goes in my guest closet, right? And I have a little rack in the basement.
No. You didn't make a decision. You asked yourself a question that revealed your instinct of where you would look for it first. Sorry, I just had to.
No. Great. If I needed this item, where would I look for it first? And my instinct would be, it would be in the basement, in a little area I've created for extra stuff in case somebody needs to borrow something.
Okay.
Which I don't know why I need this, but I had it. So I would then go downstairs to the basement to this place that has not been created yet, and I would put the jacket there.
Yeah. If that's the place where you would look for it first, then you put it there. But if there is no thing there, like there's no place for it, but there's a pile of other stuff, okay, I'm not going to leave that any worse. So what am I willing to get rid of in order to make room for this jacket? Which means something is leaving your house, right? So you are decluttering, but often it will help you realize, oh, wait, there's not actually a good place for this here. Or wait, I'm not willing to get rid of any of this stuff in order for this jacket to stay. And it will help you realize, oh, I can just donate this item.
This thing. Yeah, that's what I'm getting through all of this. Like I'm realizing this process helps you deal with yourself.
Yes. But if you don't take it there now, you're living in this land of hypotheses.
I'm still thinking about the damn jacket.
Yeah.
Right now.
You're like, oh, I'm going to put it down there. Yeah. I'll make a space down there.
Yes.
But you're not dealing with the reality of that actual space. You're not dealing with the reality of, oh, wow, I cannot stand going in this basement and I don't know. I live in Texas. We don't have basements. I'm very jealous of people with basements, but I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, if I take it down to this spot and then I realize this spot is full of spiders and all this stuff, and I don't want to leave a jacket down here. You know what I mean? But when I go there, it forces me into that reality. So much of what I do, probably 100%, honestly, of what I do is just a process that helps me accept reality. Reality about myself, reality about my stuff, reality about my space, all that.
I love this. What is the final step in this process?
Okay. So let's say, and this is going to apply to any space, all those spaces where you're taking things, but we're talking about the space that you are working on. Okay.
Okay. The
So
mudroom.
at this point, you have removed trash, easy stuff, which belongs somewhere else. You've removed donations, and you are down because you've gone through the 2 decluttering questions. You are only down to, or you are down to things that you would look for in this space, right?
Okay.
Like that's the only stuff that's in here is stuff that you would look for. But if the drawer still won't close, that's not working, right? Okay. Yeah. Like if it's still spilling outside of itself, then that's not going to work. So this last step is implementing what I call the container concept, which is something that when I had this realization about containers, it was something that if I was not writing about it as I was doing it, I would have probably been embarrassed to share it with a random person. But because I was just like, I'm just writing about what I'm figuring out, I wasn't trying to teach anybody anything at that point. And everybody went, oh, what? Like this changes everything. I was like, oh, okay. So it's not just me that this is valuable for. So here's the container concept. I used to think that containers were for putting things in. Right? Organized people love containers. They buy containers. Their house looks great. I must need more containers. And so I would bring containers into my house. So here's my little scenario that I give. Let's say my friend whose kids were the same age as mine, her little craft area looked amazing. Mine was this huge pile disaster spilling out of the cabinet. Okay. And I would look and say, oh, she has her crayons in a red bucket.
Yes.
That's the difference between her and me. Right?
Yes.
Like she has a red bucket. I don't have a red bucket. That's why my space is a disaster. So I would go and buy a red bucket and I would dump crayons in there and I would realize, oh, I've still got 700 crayons left over. Why does this not work for me the way it works for her? So I would go out and buy 2 more red buckets and then I would put the rest of my crayons in those red buckets. I'd go to put the red buckets on the shelf and my shelf wouldn't fit 3 red buckets. And I would think, are you kidding me? Why is this so hard for me? Like, why does this not work for me? And then eventually I would be like, well, obviously I need more shelves. So I'd buy more shelves. And then at some point I would think, well, I don't have any room for more shelves. Obviously I need a new house and we can't afford a new house right now. So I am doomed to be disorganized. That is just how my brain worked. I just thought that if I ran out of space in a container, I bought another container. And in reality, her house was smaller than mine. But in my mind, my issue was that my house was too small, right? Like, which doesn't make sense, but it made total sense to my brain before.
Yep.
Right. So when I was working, I was talking to myself because that's what I do with how I've been able to build what I've built, but I was talking and I was saying container and I went, container, contain, like the word contain is in there. Serve as a limit, set a boundary, like firefighters contain a fire, they create a boundary. And as long as the fire stays inside the boundary, they can keep it under control. But if it goes outside the boundary, bad things happen, right? So like their whole goal is to keep it within this boundary. And I realized, oh, a container is not for putting things in. A container is meant to serve as a limit, to serve as a boundary. And that changed everything for me because I was able to say, okay, here's the red bucket. It's not going to fit everything, but it's the boundary. So I'm going to put my favorite crayons in first. And when it's full, something happens in my brain and I realize, oh, maybe I don't need 1,000 crayons. Oh, okay. And I haven't had to make value decisions. Remember, we were talking about this thing, but what about when I might use it? And what about, and it was expensive and blah, blah, blah. Before I would pick up every single crayon. I mean, this is all hypothetical, right? But not really. But I would pick up every crayon and be like, well, I mean, I know it's broken, but broken crayons still color, right?
Oh, yes, that's right.
Right. I mean, there's Facebook memes about that, right?
Oh, my God.
So I would make all these, and it took forever for me to analyze every single one. And instead, it's just, I'm going to put my favorite ones in first, and I'm going to let the container make the hard decision for me.
Wow.
And then when I go to put the the red bucket on the shelf, I have to acknowledge that the shelf is also a container. The shelf is a limit, and it determines how many red buckets I can have. And the
Oh
size
my
of the room
God.
determines how many shelves I can have. And the size of my house is the size of my house. Remember, it's that reality acceptance, right? So I'm like, the size of my house is the size of my house. And if I'm going to put my favorite things in first, and I'm going to realize my house is a container, my house is a limit, what's my favorite thing in my house? It's the people who live in it, right? So like we deserve space first, which means I can't just keep putting in more shelves that make it hard for me to move around and make it hard for me to get to where I need to get. And so that just shifted everything. And I said, does it have space in the container? It actually doesn't matter how valuable something is, how much sentimental, feelings I have toward it. It's, does it have space? I can keep anything, but I can't keep everything and my house ever have a chance of being under control. Okay.
Wow.
So that's the container concept, which changes how you look at your house and how you look at your stuff, and lets me let go of things because I'm like, it's not me. I see the value. It's the container.
Wow.
I don't have the space for it.
Wow.
And that is very freeing.
Jesse, could you go grab me those 2 mason jars in the back with the pencils on them on our little caddy full of shit in the office?
I hope not. But
oh, it's this one. It's this one.
Yeah.
Okay. So this one's good because I've got mason jars that have Sharpies, which we use, right? Yeah. But, I've got to point out here that this right here are watercolor pencils that Chris's mother gave to one of our kids probably 10 Christmases ago. Mm-hmm. And I've never used them. I don't want them. I tried to organize them by putting them in this jar. And then I thought, okay, I'll just put them in the office in case we ever decide we'd like to watercolor someday as an art project. They were probably $20. But I remember my mother-in-law saying to one of our kids when she gave them to them when they were like in 4th grade, now you better take care of these. These are real art supplies. These are watercolor pencils. These are really good. So here I am, literally organizing them in a fucking jar and then finding a space in my office where they do not belong. These have never been used by me, and I have carted them from our old house to our new house and spent time organizing these motherfuckers to look good.
Yeah.
Oh,
and you can blame the container. You can blame the reality of the space. But here's the other thing too, though.
They need to go in the trash.
Like, if they're 10 years old, maybe, honestly, probably they do.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Here's the thing. Sometimes people are like, and this is where I always get the questions as soon as I'm done speaking about decluttering, is people will be like, maybe it's for them. They used to be an artist. They used to have the time, the bandwidth, whatever. And now either because of physical limitations or time limitations, they can't anymore. So for maybe for them, the watercolor pens or pencils, I'm not artistic enough to know which one they are, but anyway, for them, they're like, but that's so sentimental. Here's the beauty. You can keep it if you have the space, but you can't keep it and everything else. So it's like, what am I willing to let go of? So I give the space to this item that is important to me. But it also lets me go, you know what? We need the pens that we actually use in here.
Yes.
And so this allows me to get rid of these ones and identify it as, wait a minute, we never use that. I kept it for all these years because I thought, oh, it has value. Oh, whatever, and instead I'm just going to let that go. So so the step in the process is the first step that you do to be ready to, embrace the realities of your space is to consolidate things, meaning put like things together, put your pens together, put your, books together. If it's all books, put your dictionaries together, or your whatever, all the different types of books together, because that will often help you realize, oh, yeah, I actually don't need 7 skillets, but as long as they're kind of all put in different places, you're like,
I
oh,
feel
okay.
like
But
you've
if you
been
put them together, that's the first step of this fifth process. I mean, this fifth step in the process. And then you're naturally going, oh, yeah. Oh, wait, I don't use these 4. But as long as they're spread out, you're not going to see that. So you consolidate. And then once you have done that, you say, I am going to purge my least favorites until everything fits usably and
oh
get toably in this space. So it's not how much can I shove in there, it's how much can I have in here and be able to see and access with my clutter threshold. How much stuff can I do? So for me, I have a very low clutter threshold. So I purge until everything has its own space on the actual counter. And instead of worrying about finding some way to keep more, I just say, you know what? I want to be able to open this cabinet, reach in, grab my skillet, and not have to move 3 things. Because if I have to move 3 things, we all know I'm not putting them back neatly, right? So it's better for me to just have one and be able to access that easily. So it's purging down to the realities of this space until it all fits get-toably and usably, which ultimately means it's organized, even though I haven't bought any organizing products.
holy shit. I feel like you've been here in my house because when you said the thing about the skillets, I imagine myself pulling open the drawer next to the stove where there are stacks of skanky old skillets mismatched, like on top. Like it just is, holy cow. I'm so excited to go implement this. So we have a listener that has a question, and this is something that I think a lot of us struggle with, where you've got one person that's really good at organizing, and then you have somebody in the relationship like you and me who's creative and that has clutter.
Yeah.
And so let's play this question because I'd love to hear your advice on how you deal with that kind of relationship conflict.
Hi, Mel. It's Therese. What do you do if your spouse is a sloppy person, but you're not? I feel like I am constantly trying to organize our house and keep it clean, but my husband has such a difficult time keeping it that way. I am constantly picking up after him. Anyone that comes over knows my side of the room versus his side. We are childless by choice, but sometimes I feel like I have a house full of them. Help. Thank you.
Dana,
Yes.
please help us because I am her husband.
Right. And I think that's where I come into this scenario is I always say, just so you know, I'm speaking from the perspective of her husband. There is not a way to change other people, right? Like and nobody likes to be changed,
Yep.
especially in a relationship. I mean, it just, right? Like it often makes you hold on tighter to your stuff when you're just criticizing or whatever. So I'm not saying that that's what she's doing at all, but here are the things to remember that we've talked about. Clutter threshold. Okay. Your husband has a different clutter threshold than you do. In common spaces, declutter down to the lowest common clutter threshold. Now, I am not a math person, but I do sort of remember what lowest common denominators were, right? And so it's like you just go down more and more and more until you hit that lowest common clutter threshold in shared spaces. That doesn't mean you can't have elaborate systems in your spaces that are like yours to be in charge of, or, we all have different spaces within our home, but in those common spaces, it is likely never going to be satisfactory for you if you just create an elaborate system that would work for you and then try to push him into that system. Instead, remember the value of decluttering. If something does not exist in your home, it cannot end up all over the place, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, along with that, I'm not saying get rid of his stuff so that it can't get out of control. That's not what I'm saying at all. All right. But when we go back to the container concept, as far as like things that are his, give him a space. Okay. And I don't mean like this is your space, but I mean, honor the fact that he has things that he's into that are different from yours. You have things that you're into as well, and say, okay, I am going to clear out this closet or this shelf or whatever space we have available. I'm going to clear this out and say, hey, this is for you. This is what I did for my husband, who also, I mean, I'm very thankful that he's not super neat because he's way neater than me, you know? So he's always been very, very patient with all of my issues, you know? But what I did was I cleaned out something where I had thought I needed to have a place for, I think it's where I kept my kids out of season clothes. And I said, no, I'm going to clear that out. I'm going to empty it out. And I'm going to say, hey, this is your space for all of your 1980s memorabilia collectibles that you have, you know, collected over the years, because he loves that kind of stuff. But he didn't really do anything with it. And so it was just kind of there and it would just get shifted all around. So I'm like, this is the space for this. And he was like, oh, wow. Okay. You know, I mean, because I was saying I'm not going to have this argument over why do you have that stuff like that. The word why will shut people down immediately. Right. So instead say, okay, this is the place that I have created for you. So yeah, put your favorite things in there first. And then, you know, I mean, whatever doesn't fit, you know, we'll get rid of that. But that worked so well. And it's so funny because my husband has come on my podcast, like whenever I hit 100 episodes. And so on the 100th episode, it was his first time on there, and somebody had asked a question for him. And, you know, how does Dana help you declutter? And he was like, well, you know, she cleared out this thing and then she told me, hey, put your favorite, you know, memorabilia stuff in there first. And then she was like, whatever doesn't fit, get rid of that. And he was like, and that just made it really easy for me to, you know, determine what I loved and what I didn't love as much. And I said, oh yeah, the container concept. And he was like, what? You know, like, you don't have to explain the container concept to them. Give them a space and say, hey, this is your space. And then the key there is to not judge what they put in it. Like, let them just put their favorite things in first. And there is no criticism over that. And this happens a lot with kids, right? Like, you say, okay, put your favorite stuffed animals in here first. And then they don't keep the one that you spent a lot of money on and that, you know, you thought was going to be highly sentimental. And instead they keep the one that the neighbor gave them that they won at Six Flags. And, you know, it's leaking little white, you know, pebbles or whatever. I mean, like, they get to put in their container, whatever, because you can keep anything, but you can't keep everything. And then you let the container be the bad guy. So it's like, you know,
just so I'm clear. So because I really relate to this question. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason why I relate to this question is Chris's clutter threshold is way lower than mine.
Yeah.
And the truth is, he is always picking up after me. My coat is always on the back of the chair. And
can I clarify something?
Yes.
Clutter threshold is the amount of stuff that you can handle. So
he can handle
it's possible his
less.
clutter threshold is higher than yours.
Oh, that's what I meant. Higher.
Yes.
Higher.
Okay.
I meant lower, meaning
yes.
He's got to have less stuff around. So his clutter threshold is higher than mine. And if he sees something out of place, he is immediately drawn to go put it in its place. Mm-hmm. And like you, I'm the kind of person that I blow my nose with the Kleenex. I'm on my way to the trash can. Something distracts me. I put the Kleenex on the counter.
Yeah.
And we have endless, not fights, but it's frustrating for him because he has often said, it makes me feel like you think I'm your maid. And I'm like, no, I just don't care about hanging my coat up right now. Yeah. And I'll get to it later. How do you handle this conflict between an organized person and somebody who has a lower threshold?
I do want to be clear that I'm not a mental health professional. I always try to make that clear, right? Okay. So it's not easy. And this is literally the number one question. Okay. But I am going to talk to you as the person asking me this question. All right. Because you are the only person that you can control, right? So we can't control him in this situation, but you are asking because it does, you know, it's a frustration in this. What I'll say on that is the 5-minute pickup is the answer to your tendency to randomly put things down. Okay.
What is the 5-minute pickup?
So the 5-minute pickup is a daily or mostly daily habit, routine, whatever you want to call it, that gets, the reason I don't call it habits necessarily is that I thought habits were going to be magical. And that if I could just get this down, someday I would be like doing my dishes and picking things up. And I didn't even realize I did my dishes, like that's not how it works. I still have to talk myself through it, but it's a routine. And so I'm going to set the timer for 5 actual minutes, not trying to trick myself into working for longer, but I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes at whatever point in the day where it crosses my mind that, oh, wait, there's stuff all over. I'm going to set the timer for 5 minutes. I'm going to pick stuff up and put it all the way away for 5 minutes. And that is the thing that will help me to deal with the Kleenexes that are there, deal with the coat that is here. Those things get put away. So it's like how I combat my natural tendency and keep my house under control. But the other thing that happens is the more often that I do that, the more likely it is. It's never guaranteed, and it depends on how much I have going on in my brain at the time. But the more often I do that, the more likely I am to start to put something down and then realize, oh, every single day I have to come and pick up this thing from this spot. And so I'm much more likely to put it away. Okay. So that's my answer to you in this scenario. My answer to him, if he was asking me this question,
yes,
the first thing I would do is tell a little story about my husband. And we do this thing where, like, on our anniversary, we'll kind of like, write in a journal. And in the beginning, it was like all these things we've learned about each other. And it was so easy. And now we're like trying to come up with stuff, it's been 23 years. But one of the things he said, probably 2 to 3 years into this deslobification process, that I was going through, is he was like, he goes, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I've realized that it's like there actually is something wrong with you. And I was so happy that he said that to me, because what he was saying was, because he went on to say, I've realized you don't do this on purpose.
Yes.
This is not, you are not refusing to close the cabinet doors.
Yes.
You just literally don't notice whether they're open or closed. You are not putting something down thinking, oh, he will get rid of that later. You don't realize it. And so he was very nice and sweet about it, but he said, I've realized this is how your brain works. And I was like, thank you. Exactly. And he realized that as I was working on ways to combat how my brain works naturally. Right. So it wasn't just every time I say, accept how I am not saying, so, oh, well, my house is a disaster. Instead, it's accept how I am so that I can actually do things in a way that work for me so that my house is manageable. It's still not perfect, never going to be color coded, but it's manageable.
Amazing.
Right? Like I can handle it. And so anyway, that's the thing I would say there, but also to realize that it comes down to that clutter threshold. And remember, you're probably not going to help the other person do better in these types of things by organizing. You're going to help them by decluttering, even some of your own like stuff in that common area where we both use this space. It's better for us to have less stuff in here so that there's less stuff to get out of control.
So do you recommend that a couple do that together to start in the common space so that you both learn the process?
Not to start. I recommend that whoever is listening to me, I always say, I'm like, you're the one listening to this lady on the internet who has referred to herself as a slob. I mean, I'm like, you're the one who cares enough to be, listening to this podcast right now or whatever. And so you go ahead and deal with your own stuff. Like, don't start with the other person's stuff. That is a recipe for disaster. And yet their stuff is more obviously clutter, right? But start with your own stuff first and neutral stuff in visible spaces. And I can't guarantee it, except that it happened to me and it happens to so many people who contact me. As you do that and your family starts to see, oh, okay, you're getting rid of stuff that I never thought you would get rid of, or oh, it's so much easier to live in our house with less stuff, then other people start to get on board. Their view of stuff and clutter starts to change. So the first thing to do is for you to worry about your own stuff before you try to get anyone else on board.
For anybody listening that's going to go straight to a visible space and start this process, can you just let them know a little bit about the emotional aspect of trying to let go of stuff and going through the process of decluttering?
Yeah. So my 5-step process specifically, purposefully does not use emotions to declutter. But it's because I was so emotionally attached to my stuff, either because it represented who I thought I was going to be someday, or who I had been in the past, or, you know, just sentimental things that people had given me that they gave me because they were like, oh, Dana will treasure this. And I'm like, oh, do I have to change who I am? So the process doesn't use any of that, but it allows for it. Okay. So I am not going to ask you to be heartless. I'm not going to ask you to change how you feel about things, but start with the trash. Okay. Because the beauty of that is as you start with these things and you make visible progress before you've ever even dealt with anything that has emotion attached to it, is you see the progress that you're making and you realize, oh, wow, open space, less stuff changes my house. It changes how this space looks. And then by the time you get to more emotional stuff, it looks different to you, right?
Oh, that's
or
great.
you have created the space to be able to keep that item. Where when we're like, that's going to be emotional, and so I'm not going to do anything because I can't deal with those emotions, then that stuff just sits there and it's sitting with all this other stuff that isn't emotional. And that makes it, you know, never make any progress. And so know that you can make a ton of progress before you ever have to deal with emotional stuff. The other thing too, is this is something you can step away from. So start on those first 3 steps that have 0 emotions. And then if you get to emotional stuff, either skip that item and say, I'm not dealing with that today. I'm going to move to the next thing. Just don't let it stop the process, because as you continue to improve your home, you will either create the room for it or you'll be ready to deal with it.
Phenomenal. I have 3 final questions to ask
Okay.
you. You've been sensational, by the way, just
Thank
sensational. You distinguish between routines and to-do lists. Can you explain that?
Sure. So I, as a project person, I would look around my house and think, "Ooh, I'm changing today. Today's the day. This is it." Right. And so I would make a list of all the things I needed to do. Well, just looking at that list of all the things I needed to do was completely exhausting. Right. So the way I actually started to change my home was by just focusing on what I had always thought of as maintenance tasks. And it didn't make sense for me to do maintenance things when my house was a disaster. I was like, no, I need to get my house perfect. Then it will
Right.
make sense to maintain. But instead I was like, well, that's not working. But I do know that other people don't have to spend hours in their kitchen getting the kitchen clean when it's time to clean the house. And I do. And so I'm going to so I started on these very basic things. And so I started with doing the dishes. I was like, I don't know how other people don't seem to have dirty dishes piled on their counter at all times, but they don't. And so I am going to focus on this. And so I started working on the dishes. I started working on, just focused in on that, and would take about 7 days is what I found to be like, okay, now I get it. Now it's starting to feel natural. And then I would move on to another thing. And so I was adding daily habits, and that is what changed my house. That plus decluttering, not
Gotcha.
organizing, not decorating, not anything, but daily stuff plus decluttering gave me the house that I'd always wanted. So I boiled it down to 2 very basic habits. Okay. Really, there are 4 that I talk about in how to manage your home without losing your mind. But if you can't do those, you just do these 2. And if you can't do both, you just do 1. And the first one is do the dishes. So it's
Great.
like, even when I start to feel completely overwhelmed and I'm like, do the dishes. Like I hear from people all the time. Like I hear your voice all the time saying, just do the dishes. That gives me something to do to get started. Then the next thing is the 5-minute pickup. Okay.
Yep.
If I will do that, even if my house is a disaster right now, I'm not going to get it perfect first and then start doing 5-minute pickups. I'm just going to do a 5-minute pickup every day at the least. Right.
Great.
And then declutter with any time that I have.
Great. What's the third routine?
Yes. Checking the bathrooms for clutter.
Yep.
Is another one. I'm not even talking about like cleaning it. I'm not talking about cleaning it. I'm just talking about checking it for clutter. Make sure that, you know, when it's time to clean it, all I have to do is clean it. It's not like covered, you know, like you were talking about your bathroom counter, stuff like that. And then the other one is sweep the kitchen floor. It's not so much about the crumbs. It's more about an action that helps me see what has been scattered on the floor. Like the groceries where I took the frozen stuff and the refrigerated stuff out, and then I left the other stuff on the floor and it's been there for a couple of days, you know, or whatever. So that type, it's a routine that helps me keep my house under. If I will do those 4 things, my house looks fine. It's not perfect, but it looks fine if I will do those. And so what I found was I wanted to boil it down so far that I didn't need a list. So I don't have to say, oh, wow, my house is overwhelming. I need to make a new plan. Instead, I just say, my house is overwhelming. I'm going to do the dishes. Doing the dishes significantly improves my home.
Wow.
Okay.
I love this. I love this because I can do this. This is awesome. And here's a big one. Now that we're getting into the routine of these 4 things, and we have 5-minute pickups that help us with our relationship because we're kind of on a daily basis decluttering. And we have the 5-step decluttering process that has become part of the way that we live. And we're seeing progress. How do you stop bringing new stuff into your home?
So, you know how when you get sick from some kind of a food, and then you never want to eat that food again. Like, okay. It's because you had a negative experience with it. That's the beauty of decluttering. So all this angst that you're going to feel, even in my non-emotional process, you're still going to have times where you're like, I cannot believe I am sticking this in my donate box when I was so excited and spent $75 on it and blah, blah, blah. And then I never did anything, you know, like that, those feelings are going to serve you well in the future, because the more you declutter, there's a big difference in what you see at the store or the garage sale, which was my problem. You know, like that stuff is going to look different to you because you will have decluttered something very similar to it, and you'll start to see it as future clutter. So that the way to stop shopping is to take that same energy that you used to spend shopping and put it into decluttering. And then it's going to change how everything looks. And it will naturally keep you from bringing things into your house because of the pain and just the physical effort that you've put out through all of that time that you spent decluttering.
And all the money that you see that you wasted.
Yeah.
By buying stuff that you now don't need, that you've now donated, that you didn't use.
Where before you saw the $5 price tag and you thought that's a bargain. And now you've decluttered 4 things just like that item or just similar enough to it that you see the $5 and you're like, that's $5 wasted. It just shifts things in your brain.
Oh, I can't wait. Dana White, you are incredible. Thank you so much for being here on the Mel Robbins podcast. I can't wait to have you back.
I'll come back anytime.
Is there anything else that we didn't get to that you just wanted to share?
Yeah, I did want to be clear with the 5-step process. The progress and only progress part of it, that means you do not have to set aside a specific amount of time to declutter. Because for the person who's overwhelmed, I would look at my space and assess how much time it was probably going to take. And because I had always done the pull everything out and make all these piles, and then it never worked out well, I would think, oh, I'm going to need a whole day. So I can't do anything until I have a whole day, or I can't do anything until Christmas break or whatever. But when you're following the progress and only progress, I'm going to make this space better with every single thing that leaves it. And then I make a final decision about, and then I act on that final decision. Then that means I can literally work for any amount of time. So if I have an awkward pause in my day of 7 minutes, I can throw away trash and I've made this space better. That mindset shift changed my home.
Well, you've changed my life, and you're gonna be changing my home. And I can see that because I'm beginning the decluttering process right now by taking this jar of 10-year-old mismatched watercolor pencils, and I am putting them in the trash. And that feels liberating. Yeah. Dana, thank you so much. We have loved having you on the podcast. We will absolutely have you back. I cannot wait to talk to you. We'll have to do cleaning next.
Let's do it.
Done. All right. Thank you. You're the best. You're the best.
This was fun.
You're so good. Hey, it's Mel, and I wanted to jump into the middle of that podcast episode you were watching to make sure you knew about a free opportunity that I created for you. It's a new 3-part training called Take Control with Mel Robbins. It is packed with science. It is packed with action. It's exactly what you need right now. I know that you are tired of feeling like you're in survival mode. You're tired of merely coping, and it is time to tap back into your excellence and power again. Let me coach you. Let me guide you on the steps that you need to take in order to level up and start executing. It's going to feel so great to start winning again. All you got to do is click on the link right there in the caption. It's melrobbins.com/take control. It is free. It is for you. And you need to be in it. Now, let's go back to the podcast. Oh, I don't know about you, but I feel like I just need to sprint down the stairs and go to my mudroom with a black trash bag. I feel so empowered. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to run and go find my husband, Chris, because he needs to listen to this because I think it will change our dynamic. I am so excited. I cannot wait to hear how you put everything you just learned into use to create a better life. And in case nobody else tells you, I'm going to tell you I love you, especially you slobs out there, you people who can't get your shit together like me, you bathroom counter clutterers. I see you. You're my people. And for you, if you're the OCD neatnik that's a walking Excel spreadsheet, I love you too. Please use today's episode to be kinder to yourself, to declutter, and to go create a better life. Alrighty, I'll see you in a few days. Oh, one more thing. It's the legal language. This podcast is presented solely for educational and entertainment purposes. It is not intended as a substitute for the advice of a physician, professional coach, psychotherapist, or other qualified professional.